The night that changed everything started like any other long shift, with fire on metal and rain on the roof. I was alone in my shop at 3 in the morning. The big bay doors were shut, the lights were humming, and the air smelled like hot steel and old storms. Rain beat on the metal roof in one steady sheet. Somewhere in the dark, a piece of cooling metal ticked as it shrank. I ran my thumb along the weld I had just finished on the fender of a '67 Mustang. The bead was smooth and straight, a clean line holding two tired pieces together. Most people saw that car and saw rust. I saw history. I saw where time and bad roads had hit too hard. I saw something that could be brought back and maybe even made stronger than the day it left the factory. That was the thing about broken things. If you respected the damage, you could fix it. Headlights flashed through the rain outside, cutting across the front windows. They flickered once, then dipped to the shoulder of the highway. A boxy delivery van rolled to a stop, hazard lights blinking weakly in the dark. By the time I told myself to ignore it, my body was already moving. I grabbed my canvas jacket and the keys to my tow truck and stepped out into the storm. The rain came down sideways, sharp and cold against my face. I backed the tow truck in front of the van and climbed out, boots sinking into wet gravel. The van was one of those old Metro-style rigs, but someone had loved it. Deep, sage green paint, gold lettering on the side. Baker Logistics. The kind of paint you pay a real shop to do, not some cheap spray can job. Whoever owned it had cared about how it looked. The driver's door opened, and a woman climbed down. Her trench coat was soaked straight through, sticking to her legs. Dark auburn hair clung to her neck in heavy strands. She almost slipped, caught herself, then shut the door with a sharp, controlled motion. She did not wave her arms or call out a desperate, "Please help." She just turned and faced me like she was ready for bad news and worse choices. "I don't have cash for a tow," she called over the wind. No apology, no begging, just a fact. "And I'm not leaving the inventory in the back." "I didn't ask for cash," I said. My voice sounded rough after hours of silence. "I've got a shop half a mile up. We get you off the road before somebody plows into you. Your alternator is dead. And by the smell, your water pump locked up and snapped the belt. You're not going anywhere tonight." Her eyes narrowed like she was measuring me instead of the storm, grease-stained jacket, boots that had seen too many winters. A mechanic in the middle of the night, offering help without posting the price. "Keon," I said, holding out my hand and wiping the worst of the grime on my thigh. "I fix old metal. That's it." She paused just long enough to show she understood the risk. Then she took my hand. Her grip was cold but steady. "Eleanor," she said. "And if you scratch the bumper, I will bill you for the paint." A corner of my mouth lifted. Understood. I hooked up the winch cable and pulled the van into my bay. Under the bright fluorescent lights, the damage looked even worse. Steam leaked out around the grill. Water dripped off the frame onto the concrete. Eleanor stood by my workbench with her arms folded tight across her chest. Quick shivers ran through her, but she kept her back straight. She did not seem afraid of the tools or the lifts. She just watched. I popped the hood. It was a mess. A shiny alternator sat up front, bright silver. Too bright. The belt was burned and frayed. When I put my hand on the water pump pulley and tried to turn it, it did not move at all. Locked solid. "Who works on this?" I asked, tapping the alternator housing. "Bryson Moore," she said. The name came out like she was biting glass. "He manages my whole fleet. He serviced this van on Monday. Charged me $3,000 for a full overhaul." I knew the name. Everybody in our district did. Bryson was the guy who rolled up to meets in a loud blue drag car that looked like a bruise. All shiny parts that did not matter. Cheap work where it counted. He spent money on pretty clamps and paint, then underpaid his techs, and delayed payroll like it was a hobby. I wiped a finger along the edge of the water pump. Black sludge came off on my glove. "He didn't overhaul anything," I said. "He spray-painted a junkyard alternator and stuck it in. That pump is original to the engine. It seized, burned through the belt, and cooked your block." Eleanor stopped shivering. Her whole posture went tight, like someone had pulled a strap across her ribs. She stepped closer, heels clicking on the concrete, and stared at the grease on my fingertip. "Are you sure?" she asked. "I don't guess," I said. I grabbed a rag and scrubbed at the alternator casing until the silver paint flaked away. Underneath, pitted rust and old stamped numbers appeared. "I prove it." She pulled her phone from her coat and started taking pictures. Click, click. Her hands were steady. There was control there, the kind that comes from having to hold it together for a long time. "Can you fix it?" she asked, eyes still on the metal. "Tonight?" "No," I said. "I need parts. But I can get it running better than he did by Tuesday." Quote. She let out one long breath and pushed a wet strand of hair behind her ear, like that small, neat motion could hold everything else in place. "Tuesday," she repeated. "I have a wedding contract on Saturday. This van has to run." "I'll have it done," I said. It was a promise I should have weighed. But seeing her there, soaked and exhausted and still standing straight, flipped a switch in me. My hands wanted to move. My brain wanted to solve the problem. "I can't pay you until that contract clears," she said, her chin lifted. Not defiant, just determined. "I don't take charity. I'll sign a note." With interest. Pride, sharp and clean, fear right behind it. "Bryson can make your life hard if you call him out," I said. "He holds my service agreement," she answered. "If I use a mechanic who isn't on his list, he can say I broke the contract and call a lien on the fleet. 40,000 due at once. He's been waiting for an excuse." There it was, the real trap, paper and fine print. "Pay for the parts up front," I said. "Labor when you get paid." She met my eyes. I saw the calculation pass through her face. Risk, cost, options. Then she nodded. "Deal," she said. By the time I locked up the bay for the night, Eleanor was wrapped in an old wool blanket I kept for late jobs. She sat on a stool near the workbench, laptop open, tapping through spreadsheets. She had found the one clear corner of my cluttered space and turned it into an office like she had done it 100 times before. "I can't lose that contract," she said, still looking at the screen. "If I lose it, I lose the fleet." "I'm not letting the van fail," I said. Her fingers paused over the keys. She looked up for a second, eyes meeting mine, then went back to work. It wasn't a soft look. It wasn't gratitude. It was acceptance, with the careful edge of someone who had learned that help always came with strings. I ordered parts before dawn. A real alternator, new water pump, belt, tensioner, hoses, clamps. I printed every receipt on my shop letterhead and stapled them into a folder. Evidence. Protection. Habit. On Tuesday afternoon, Eleanor came back. This time she wore a cream-knit cardigan over a simple dress, her hair dry and pulled over one shoulder. She set a cashier's check for the parts and a folded promise note on my workbench with a neat motion. "You document everything," she said, looking at the folder. "I learned to," I said. "Some people make a living off gaps." "So does Bryson," she muttered. I got to work under the harsh lights, swapping the water pump, routing the new belt. While I worked, she sat at my oil-stained desk with a stack of papers. At one point she stood, picked up a flashlight, and held it perfectly aimed without my asking. "You've done this before," I said. "I've watched people do it," she said, mostly while they told me it would cost more because I didn't understand. "You understand enough," I said. She gave me a small, quick curve of her mouth. Not a big smile, just a crack in the wall. When I turned the key that night, the van fired on the first try. The engine settled into a steady idle, smooth and strong. The white steam from the first run faded into nothing. Eleanor stood in the bay doorway, watching the tailpipe, shoulders finally dropping a fraction. "Saturday," she said, like she was testing the word. "It'll make Saturday," I said. She stepped forward and held out her hand again. "Thank you, Keon," she said. No flattery, no show. Just a clean sentence from someone who meant it. I shook her hand, and this time, the contact lasted a second longer than it needed to. Not romantic yet. Not exactly. Just two people who had seen enough damage to know when something real was starting to form. And I had no idea that fixing her van was only the first thing she would ask me to help her rebuild. By Wednesday, the rain finally broke. Morning light came through the shop windows in a pale strip. The streets outside still shined from last night's storm, but for the first time in weeks, the sky over Seattle was mostly clear. I was halfway through a brake job when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Eleanor. She sent nothing but an address and a short line. "Come by if you can." I wiped my hands, closed the bay, and drove out. Her place was a small white house at the edge of a quiet neighborhood. There was a short fence and a narrow driveway. What caught my eye first was the garden along the porch. Even in the cold, someone had fought to keep color there. Small flowers, dark soil, neat rows. Eleanor was crouched by the flower bed, pressing soil around a new plant. She wore patterned gardening gloves, shorts, and a simple tank top under her usual cardigan. Her hair was pulled over one shoulder, dry now, with a few pieces falling loose around her face. I stepped through the gate. The gravel shifted under my boots. "You found it," she said without looking up. "I followed directions," I said. She let out a short breath that was close to a laugh. Then she brushed dirt off her gloves and stood. Her gaze came up and met mine, steady and direct. "Bryson called this morning," she said. "He asked why my van wasn't at his shop." "What did you tell him?" I asked. "That I used a different mechanic," she said. Her jaw tightened. "He threatened the lien." Quote, I leaned my shoulder against the fence, keeping my hands loose at my sides. "And?" I asked. "I told him I have receipts and photos," she said, "and that if he pushes, I push back." She watched me like she was waiting for my judgment. I did not give any. Instead, she asked a question I did not see coming. "Do you like women who've been through life?" she said. The words were not soft, not a joke. They landed between us like a test. I looked at the dirt under her nails, the way her shoulders stayed straight, the garden she was keeping alive around a house she was clearly fighting to hold. "I like someone like you," I said. Eleanor swallowed once. She did not blush. She did not smile. She just nodded, like she was filing that answer away somewhere important. "Then you should see this," she said. Inside, her house smelled gently of cedar and dried herbs. A kettle hummed on the stove. The kitchen was small but clean. Everything had a place. She poured 2 mugs of tea, something herbal and sharp. No sugar. No asking what I preferred. She slid 1 mug toward me and pushed a dish towel across the counter. "Your hands," she said. "You'll leave oil on my paperwork." She was right. I wiped my palms until they were dry. Eleanor opened her laptop and turned the screen toward me. A spreadsheet filled the display, row after row of payments and dates. Vendor names. Service codes. Amounts that looked wrong for the jobs listed. "He billed me for brake lines last month," she said, tapping the screen. "Fuel filters. Full inspections. And none of these vans were down." "Service at night?" I asked. She nodded. "He said it kept us on schedule." Efficient, I thought. Or hiding. "I need to inspect everything," I said. "If we do that, he calls the lien," she said. "He will say I broke the agreement by using you instead of his shop." "We do not break the agreement," I said. "We prove the agreement is fraudulent." Her eyes narrowed a little, thinking. "How?" she asked. I took my card out of my wallet and set it on the counter. "You hire me as an independent inspector," I said. "A safety audit. You document that you are protecting your drivers and your clients. If he tries to punish that, he looks like he is punishing safety." She tapped her fingers on the counter in a steady rhythm. Fear was there, but so was fight. "I can do that," she said finally. That night, I did not go home. I did not like leaving her van alone and half-stripped in the bay. I rolled out the cot in my loft above the shop, listened to the building settle, and watched shadows from passing cars move across the ceiling. Down below, Eleanor's van sat on stands, each part tagged and labeled. Honest metal. No fresh paint to hide the age. In the morning, Eleanor came through the bay door in black jeans, boots, and that same cardigan folded over one arm. She carried a clipboard. "I printed an audit letter," she said, holding it up. "Official request for a safety inspection, signed and dated." "Good," I said. "We start with the vans that keep your contracts alive." The next 2 days were not a blur. They were slow and exact. I slid under chassis after chassis, flashlight between my teeth. I traced brake lines and fuel lines with my fingers. I checked filters, pads, hoses. I called out part numbers, and Eleanor wrote them down in neat block letters on her clipboard. "Rear brake pads, 3 millimeters," I said from under one van. Eleanor sat on a stool beside me, pen ready. "Invoice says new pads last month," she said. "They lied," I said. On the second afternoon, she walked over to the whiteboard where I kept job notes. She studied my messy list for a second, then picked up a marker and rewrote it in clean lines. Alternator output, belt tension, coolant pressure test, brake line inspection, fuel filter seal, photos, bag and tag. "You missed the VIN photo," she said, pointing to the bottom. I blinked once and then smiled. "You've memorized my process," I said. "I've spent years being told I don't know what's under the hood." She said. I decided that was over. Something shifted in my chest. Respect, clear and solid. "Good," I said. "Then you understand why we are about to drag him into the light." That Thursday night, we finally stopped moving around 11:17 p.m. The shop was quiet again, engines ticking as they cooled. Outside, the street was wet and dark. The city hummed in the distance. We sat on the tailgate of my tow truck, sharing cheap takeout from a white container. Steam rose into the cold air. Eleanor had a folder open on her lap, holding the corners down with her hand so the breeze would not flip the pages. "My biggest client is the city," she said. "If I fail this quarter, they terminate. If they terminate, the bank calls my loan. If the bank calls it, Bryson buys my fleet for pennies." Her voice stayed steady, but her fingers pressed hard enough into the paper to leave small marks. I wiped the grease from my hands, more carefully this time. When I was sure my palms were clean, I leaned closer and pointed to a line on the contract. "He is draining you," I said, "but he is also leaving a trail." Eleanor's eyes flicked to my hands, then to my face. "People always tell me to rest," she said in a low voice. "No one tells me how." "We rest when it is safe," I said. She did not argue. She took a bite of food, chewed slowly, then exhaled. "I hate that you are right," she said. "I know," I answered. We finished dinner in a quiet that was not empty. It was the kind of silence that comes when both people are too tired to pretend. When she stood, she stacked her contracts with careful hands, then held the folder out to me. "Can you keep this in your office?" she asked. "If Bryson shows up at mine, I do not want him touching any of this." "I lock it," I said. "Nobody gets to it unless you say so." She nodded and pulled her cardigan tighter around herself. "Thank you," she said. Not soft, not shy, just honest. That was the night I realized this was no longer just about a broken van or a bad mechanic. We were building something else in that shop, piece by piece. Trust, maybe. Whatever it was, it felt a lot like checking a frame for cracks and finding solid metal underneath. The next week did not feel like a week. It felt like one long inspection broken into small pieces. Eleanor made the audit official. She had her lawyer draft the paperwork so tight there were no gaps for Bryson to slide through. The letter was on her company letterhead. It used all the right words. Safety, compliance, duty of care. She was not just fighting for herself. She was fighting for every driver who put their hands on one of those steering wheels. I brought in help. Joe, my old mentor, showed up on Monday. He was in his late 50s, with a limp and hands that looked like old leather, but he still moved like he could outwork any kid in the bay. "Fleet work again," he said, looking at the line of vans in my lot. "You know how to pick a quiet life, Keon." "I tried quiet," I said. "It did not take." He laughed once, then got to work. Eleanor's routine slipped into my shop like it had always belonged there. She came every afternoon with a thermos of her herbal tea and a paper bag of food she claimed was extra. She hung her cardigan on a hook near my jacket like she was claiming a spot on the wall. She did not hover. She worked. Sometimes she sat at my desk making calls to the city or the bank, voice firm and clear. Sometimes she walked the line of vans, checking license plates and contract numbers. A few times she crouched beside me on the floor, holding a flashlight while I traced lines. On Friday, we got our first clean break. A van came in with a rough idle. The driver said it felt off when he braked at lights. Nothing big yet, but it was there. I popped the hood, followed the fuel line with my fingers, and then stopped. There, tucked into the system, was a bright, hard spot of color. A clamp that did not belong on a work van. It was anodized blue, the kind of shiny part you see on show cars, not commercial rigs. I loosened it and held it up in the shop light. "Eleanor!" I called. She was at my desk, reading through a contract with her pen between her teeth. She set it down and walked over, heels tapping on the concrete. "Do you see it?" I asked. She leaned in close. Her shoulder brushed my arm, her eyes locked on the metal. "He put racing parts on my vans," she said slowly, "instead of real replacements." "And he billed you for real replacements," I said. Joe leaned over from the next bay and squinted at the clamp. "That piece is custom," he said. "You do not buy that at a parts store. That is from a race shop or a special order." I grabbed a clear evidence bag from the shelf, slid the clamp inside, sealed it, and wrote the date and VIN number on the outside with a thick marker. Then I pulled out my phone and filmed a quick video. The bag, my hand, the van, the part. My voice steady as I read off the details. "Chain of custody," I said. Eleanor's breath hitched once. Her hand went to the edge of the workbench like she needed something solid under her fingers. "What do we do now?" she asked. "Now," I said, "we stop letting him hide behind paperwork. We let the paperwork point at him." That night, Eleanor sat in my office with her laptop on the desk and the bagged clamp beside it. Her shoulders were tight. The screen glowed in the dim light. She drafted an email to the State Bureau of Automotive Repair. She attached photos. She attached copies of invoices, a spreadsheet of mismatched charges, and the video clip of me holding that blue clamp. She did not hit send. Her finger hovered over the mouse. Her jaw was clenched. "If I do this," she said quietly, "he will come after me. He always does when someone gets in his way." I stood beside her chair, close enough that I could feel the heat from her body but not touching her. "If you don't," I said, "he keeps doing this until someone loses brakes on a hill. With a full load. Maybe a driver, maybe a family in another car. You know that." She closed her eyes for a second. When she opened them, they were bright but steady. "I am so tired of being scared," she said. "You are not scared," I said. "You are careful. There is a difference." Then she clicked send. For a long moment, she just stared at the screen. Her shoulders sagged a little, not in defeat, but like someone had finally put down a heavy box. "I feel sick," she said. "That is normal," I said. "We keep moving anyway." The Bureau answered faster than I expected. 2 days later, an agent called and asked for all physical evidence and offered an inspection date. Eleanor listened with the phone pressed tight to her ear, nodded, and wrote down everything. "I will bring the clamp myself," she said. "And the alternator housing, and the brake pads." After she hung up, she leaned back in the chair and let out a long breath. "Okay," she murmured. "Okay." On the day of the appointment, she drove her cleanest van to the Bureau office. I followed in my truck with a box of parts. The clerk behind the counter took our statements, signed a form, and logged every piece into their system. Paper, ink, boxes, labels. It seemed simple, but I knew how much weight lived inside those little steps. 2 days after that, Bryson walked into my shop. He did not knock. The bay doors were open for air, and he just strolled in like he owned the concrete. His truck was spotless, his hair perfect. He wore a jacket with his shop name on it, and a bright blue drag car stitched across the back. Eleanor was in the main bay, clipboard in hand, checking a tire tread depth while Joe finished a rotation. When she looked up and saw Bryson, she did not back away. She stepped forward. "Keon is an authorized inspector," she said before he could open his mouth. "This is a safety audit for my fleet." Bryson smiled, but there was no charm in it. "Eleanor," he said, stretching her name out. "You hiring strangers now?" I wiped my hands slow, set my wrench down, and walked over. My pulse was steady. I had faced worse things than a man with a fake smile. "Not a stranger," I said. "I am the one who found your spray-painted alternator." His eyes snapped to mine. The smile thinned. "You do not know what you are talking about," he said. I walked over to a shelf, picked up the old alternator housing we had saved. Silver paint scraped away to show the rust and pitting. I set it on the workbench with a heavy thud. $3,000, I said, "for this." Eleanor held out a folder. Her hand did not shake. "I have receipts," she said, "photos, part numbers, and the bureau has a component you used on my vans." For a moment, Bryson's gaze slid to the folder, then to the alternator, then back to her face. I saw the flicker, not guilt. Not yet. Just realization that his game was not as quiet as he thought. "You do not want to do this," he said, dropping his voice as he stepped closer to her. "I can call that lane and take your fleet. You know I can." Eleanor lifted her chin. Her shoulders were square. "If you try," she said, "my attorney files for an order based on retaliation against a safety audit. You can explain to a judge why you are punishing me for following the law." His smile cracked for real this time. He turned his attention back to me. "You think you are a hero," he said. I did not raise my voice. I did not move fast. I just stepped between him and Eleanor, like I was filling the space I was always meant to stand in. "I think you are a risk," I said. "And I fix risks." His nostrils flared. For a second I thought he might swing. Then he backed up with his hands raised just enough to show he was calm. Quote, "This is not over," he said. He turned and walked out, shoulders tight, jaw clenched. The shop was quiet after he left. All I could hear was the tick of a cooling engine and Joe muttering under his breath in the next bay. Eleanor did not move. She was staring at the empty space where Bryson had been standing. Her fingers were clenched around her clipboard so hard her knuckles were white. "You stood in front of me," she said at last, her voice low. "That is what I do," I said. Her eyes lifted to mine. "Why?" she asked. I could have given a long speech. I did not. "Because you showed up in a storm and did not ask for pity," I said. "Because he is wrong, and because I do not like people who hunt for excuses to hurt others." Something in her face softened, only for a second, but I saw it. "I am going to win," she said. "I know," I said. I believed it. I just did not know yet what it was going to cost her, or what it would cost us before it was over. The sabotage came 2 nights after Bryson walked out of my shop. Eleanor left just before midnight in one of her vans. I watched the taillights fade past the bay doors and went upstairs to shut down the loft. I had one boot off when my phone rang. Her name lit up the screen. "Keon," she said when I answered. Her voice was tight and flat at the same time. "The brakes." Cold went straight through my chest. "Where are you?" I asked. 2 blocks from your shop," she said. "I got it stopped. Barely." "I'm coming," I said. I did not bother with my other boot. I jammed it on, half-tied, grabbed my keys, and ran. Her van sat half up on the curb, hazard lights blinking in the wet dark. Rain fell in a hard sheet again, bouncing off the hood and the street. Eleanor was standing by the front bumper without a coat, hair sticking to her cheeks, both hands braced on the metal like she was holding the van in place by will. I slid under the chassis with my flashlight. It did not take long to see it. The rear brake line had been cut. Clean. Not worn, not rust. A cut as sharp as a knife. Eleanor crouched beside me, water soaking into her sleeves. She did not gasp. She did not cry. She just stared. "He did this," she said. "He ordered it," I said. "Someone did the hands-on work." I slid out and stood, rain running down my neck. My voice stayed calm because hers could not shake right now. "You are not driving anything tonight," I said. "You are coming back to the shop. You are coming to the loft." She opened her mouth like she wanted to argue. Then her eyes drifted back to the cut line, and I saw the fight in her shoulders go from tight to something else. "Okay," she said. That one word held more trust than any thank you she had ever given me. Back at the shop, I pulled the van inside, shut the bay doors, and locked them. Then I checked the side door, the windows, and the back gate. Old habits from another life came back strong. Eleanor stood in the loft doorway, arms wrapped around herself, cardigan wet and clinging. "You can take the cot," I said. "I will stay up and work." She shook her head. "I can't be alone," she said. "No drama, just truth. Not after that, not tonight." I nodded once. "Then you take the bed," I said. "I'll sleep up here in the chair." Quote. She looked at the small ladder to the loft, then back at me. "Together," she said. It was not a demand. It was a question from someone who had run out of safe rooms. I held her gaze. "Together," I said. We climbed into the loft. The space was small, barely more than a low ceiling, a mattress, and a lamp. It smelled like old wood and a little like engine oil that never quite washed out. Eleanor slid under the blanket and lay on her side, stiff as a board. I lay next to her, on my back, hands folded over my chest, leaving space between us. She took a few short breaths. Then she shifted, turned toward me. Her forehead found my chest like a magnet. Her arms wrapped around my waist with more strength than I expected. I wrapped one arm around her back, firm and steady, and placed my other hand on her shoulder. "You're okay," I said. "You're here. We caught it." Her fingers tightened in my shirt. After a moment, she tipped her face up. Her eyes searched mine in the dim light. "Kihan," she whispered. I did not rush. I did not lean down first. I waited. She lifted herself on one elbow and closed the distance on her own. The kiss was slow and sure. Not wild, not frantic. It tasted like rain and fear and relief, and something softer that had been waiting between us since that first night in the storm. Her hand slid to the back of my neck, fingers curling there, a clear signal that this was what she wanted. I held her waist, kept the pressure gentle, let her set the pace. For a few breaths, the world narrowed to the sound of rain on the roof and the steady beat of her heart under my hand. When we parted, she stayed close, forehead resting against my jaw. "I'm so tired of doing everything alone," she said. "You're not alone anymore," I said. "Not in this." She relaxed against me, just a little. We fell asleep like that, in a cramped loft over a shop full of broken machines. In the morning, there was no time to be soft. I rebuilt every brake line on that van with Joe's help. We photographed each cut with a ruler beside it. We bagged the cut sections, labeled them, and added them to the evidence box. Eleanor sat at my desk in her cardigan with a mug of tea in both hands, watching every step. "We need security," she said. "We need proof that holds up," I said. "And we need cameras." That night, I climbed a ladder in the rain and mounted cameras under the eaves. My gloves were slick. The drill slipped once and bit the padding by my thumb. I hissed and shook out my hand. Eleanor stood below me, holding an umbrella over my head so the rain would not drown the tools. She did not complain. She did not tell me to come down. She just kept the umbrella steady and watched the angle of the cameras like she was learning a new map. "Point it a little lower," she said once, "so it catches license plates." I looked down at her, then back at the mount and adjusted it. "You're right," I said. She gave a small nod. "I'm learning." When I dropped to the ground, soaked and tired, she shifted the umbrella so it covered both of us. "I'm sorry," she said, "that you got pulled into this." "I chose it," I said. "I knew what kind of fight it was." Her lips pressed together. Then she nodded. "Then I'm choosing it too," she said, "with you." Days turned into a pattern, inspections, evidence logs, calls with lawyers in the bureau. We both went home sometimes, but the shop became the center of the storm. The bureau matched the Blue Clamp's serial number to a racing account tied to Bryson's name. It was his signature, hidden in plain sight. A few days later, the agent called. "We have enough for a warrant," he said. "We'll move on his shop with police support." Eleanor stood beside me while I held the phone. When I hung up, she looked at the clamp bag on my shelf like it was a relic. "It's over?" she asked. "Not yet," I said, "but it's closing on him, not on you." The police searched Bryson's shop that week. They found more anodized parts tied to fleet vans. They found fake invoices and cut tools that matched the damage on Eleanor's lines. Bryson was arrested for fraud and tampering. The win did not feel like fireworks. It felt like the first clear breath after you have been underwater too long. The real victory came the morning Eleanor's fleet rolled out again. It was a clear December day. Cold, but bright. The lot in front of my shop was full of white vans with Baker Logistics on the side, engines idling smooth. Drivers leaned on fenders, laughing, not watching the road for a breakdown. The oldest van, the sage green Metro, sat in front of the bay, paint shining in the winter sun. Baker won, the one her father had started with. Eleanor stood near the front bumper talking to a city rep, a senator, and one of her bigger clients. She wore a navy suit and low heels. Her cardigan was draped over her arm instead of around her shoulders. Her hair was pinned up, a few soft pieces loose by design. I stayed in the shadow of the bay door, wiping my hands on a rag. I did not want to break the scene. It was her moment. She looked over once and saw me. Then she stopped mid-sentence. "Excuse me," she told the group, and walked away from them toward me without rushing. Every eye in the lot followed her. She stopped right in front of me. "What are you doing over here?" she asked. "Just checking the idol," I said. "You have big people to impress." Quote, "I do," she said. Her eyes did not leave mine, starting with you. She reached into her briefcase and took out a thick document. She held it up with both hands. "Partnership agreement," she said. 50-50. You run fleet maintenance and the restoration side. I run logistics. We buy the building together. We own the trucks together." I looked at the papers, then at her. "You don't have to do this," I said quietly. "You already cleared your name. You could walk away clean." "Yes," she said. Her voice was just loud enough for the nearby clients to hear. "I could, but I am not going back to doing this alone." She stepped a little closer and lowered her voice for me only. "You are the man who stood between me and someone who tried to break me," she said. "You fixed what mattered, not just the metal. I want to build the next part with you." She signed the agreement right there on the hood of Baker 1. Strong, clear strokes. Then she handed me the pen. I did not rush. I let the weight of it settle. Then I signed next to her. Eleanor smiled, small and real. Then her face softened in a way I had only seen late at night in the loft. "I asked you something in my garden," she said. "Do you remember?" "I do," I said. "You asked if I like women who've been through life." "And you said you like someone like me," she said. I took a slow breath, then stepped in just enough that she could stop me if she wanted. She did not move away. Her hand lifted and caught my jacket lightly at the front. A clear sign. Her choice. In daylight. In front of anyone who cared to see. I kissed her. Respectful. Certain. No hiding. No storm covering us. She kissed me back with the same calm kind of sure. Behind us, the senator politely pretended to check his watch. A driver grinned into his sleeve. The world kept going. Eleanor pulled back first, but only a little. "Come inside," she said. "We have work to do." "Yes," I said. A quiet, deep satisfaction settled in my chest, like a bolt tightened to spec. Some people look at something old and worn and see a reason to throw it away. I have learned to look closer. Frames can be reinforced, lines can be replaced, engines can find their rhythm again. If something still has a heartbeat, it is worth restoring. Sometimes that includes a van. Sometimes it includes a woman who has been through life. And sometimes, if you are lucky, it includes the man who finally learns how to stand beside her.